Hello, friends. My name is Ben, and I am here at Stanford University to talk about Archibald Alexander. So, this was the closest university that fit the model that Archibald expressed in his books and in his life. So, I thought I would come here for the first discussion. So, let's talk a little bit about Let's talk about first of all, number one, uh, what are the goals of education? What were required, according to Alexander, for students who were going to a university or going through graduate education. And this is what he has to say. Students required knowledge of biblical and other ancient languages, ancient and modern history, historical theology, chronology, geography, modern travels, natural history, chemistry, geology, a general acquaintance with the whole circle of sciences. Indeed, there is scarcely any science or branch of knowledge which may not be made subservient to theology. He also said, books were the divinely appointed means for transmitting both divine and human knowledge. They should function as tools for information and edification. The Bible was not given to teach us everything. Other knowledge is useful. So what's interesting is he talks about this when he's first starting Princeton Seminary. And here I am at Stanford, and Stanford was started about 50 or 60 years later uh, by Leland and Jane Stanford, and they adopted a very similar mindset. In fact, during the inauguration, and let me just show you a picture here of the university. So you can see that the sun has just come out, so it's a little bright. Let me see if I can move this over. There we go. So you can see in the center, there is an arch. Now, just imagine under that arch, there is a platform. And on the platform is where Leland and Jane Stanford are standing. And they're looking out onto us, and they're giving a speech. And this is what they had to say on the opening day of the university. Its nature, that of a university, with such seminaries of learning as shall make it of the highest grade, including mechanical institutes, museums, galleries of art, laboratories and conservatories, together with all things necessary for the study of agriculture in all its branches, and for mechanical training, and the studies and exercises directed to the cultivation and enlargement of the mind. Now, that's not the only thing he said, because after his speech, another guy got up, and this guy was the president of the university, and his name was President Jordan, and this is what he had to say, looking out onto the quad where we're sitting right now. These long corridors, and you can see the corridors extending to the left and to the right of the arch. These long corridors, with their stately pillars, these circles of waving palms, will have their part in the student's training as surely as the chemical laboratory or the seminary room. The university has its origin in the shadow of a great sorrow, and its purpose is the wish to satisfy for the coming generation the hunger and thirst after knowledge, that undying curiosity which is the best gift of God to man. The influence of the boy, to the nobility of whose short life the Leland Stanford Junior University is a tribute and a remembrance, will never be lost in our country. The golden age of California begins when its gold is used for purposes like this. From such deeds must rise the new California of the coming century, no longer the California of the gold seeker and the adventurer, but the abode of high-minded men and women, trained in the wisdom of the ages, and imbued with the love of nature, the love of man, and the love of God. And bright indeed will be the future of our state if, in the usefulness of the university, every hope and prayer of the founders shall be realized. Now, Leland and Jane Stanford were very clear about God being at the center of Stanford. They recognized the problems though, because in their time they wanted to make a distinction. They were not members of a church. They attended churches, so they attended a Presbyterian church locally. It's about probably from where I am, if I probably about a 20-minute drive into town. But they also attended another church in San Francisco. So, but they did not claim to be a member of any specific denomination, and they wanted the university to be the same. So they were very, very clear on making sure that the university followed no creeds. And this is the second thing I wanted to talk about, is that uh, the danger of moving away from the Bible, the danger from moving away from a biblical point of view. So let me read to you something that they said. So this was Jane Stanford, who was very spiritual, very close to God, but she was determined to make sure the university did not follow a creed, but rather it was open to everyone. She says this: I note with satisfaction that the students, as a rule, attend the chapel services voluntarily in large numbers and listen with rare attentiveness to the sermons preached. I also note with gratification that there prevails among them a deep and sincere religious sentiment, as is shown by the regular Sunday evening meetings attended chiefly by the young men and women of the university. However, one of the interesting things about the problems at the university, and this was something that a professor, Dr. Gardner, stated. Many students do not care for church services, but the church cares for them. I visit these delightful drifters in hall and frat. I catch them in the hospital. I invite them to my home. Office hours daily provide opportunity for friendly consultation. Sorrow, sin, and shame are not absent from student life. The parson is the friend of all, not alone of the pious. So what they were dealing with at Stanford was that the students didn't much care for religion. They very much admired the church. And let me show you a picture of this magnificent church. I'm not sure if we can go inside today. The doors are open. I'll take you inside if there's time. So this is an amazing chapel. This is called the Memorial Chapel. It was built it was dedicated to the deceased son of Leland and Jane Stanford. This is why it's called the Memorial Chapel. I wanted to read something that Daniel Walker Howe talked about in his article, Protestantism, Voluntarism, Personal Identity in Antebellum America. I want you to be thinking about this looking at the church as I'm reading this and thinking about it. In the long run, it was institutional structures that advanced religious gains in the early republic. Seminaries, schools, colleges, missions, benevolent associations, and, of course, churches themselves. With a bibliocentric understanding of the relationship between and the uses of the book and other books, evangelical Christians in the early American Republic established theological schools that advanced a bibliocentric structure of knowledge. These schools provided the first opportunity for anything resembling graduate education in the United States. Their faculties, graduates, publications, and affiliated institutions supplied and formatively shaped a bibliocentric print culture that aimed to be comprehensive in scope, offering a range of reading material from simple tracts to sophisticated treatises, as well as comprehensive and effective in reach. One of the things that Archibald Alexander really encouraged at Princeton was a daily devotional reading of the Bible that was expected, and Sabbath reading was to be limited to books concerned with practical religion. All of these studies aimed to prepare theological students to explain, defend, and experience the Bible. Now, I say this because this was not a focus here. as we heard from uh, earlier earlier texts, they had a big problem at Stanford that people were not taking church seriously. They were kind of going to the chapel because it's beautiful. It's gorgeous inside. The stained glass windows are literally from another century. But the students themselves they had problems with drinking on campus, where they actually got some legal problems. And this was back when most of the universities in the United States, they were still focused on providing religious education at the universities. So that is a danger when you move away from the Bible, I would say. Now, what should be the missional goal of the university, according to Archibald Alexander and according to the Stanfords? And it's very interesting because they do they move in very similar circles. So finally, let's talk about what are the ultimate aims of a university, not just the goals for the students, and not just some of the dangers, but the ultimate aims. Now, what Alexander said, and this was something that Samuel Miller, uh, who was who at Alexander's inauguration, he was reviewing the aims of Princeton Seminary. He said that the goal of the seminary was to provide the best instructors, an ample library, and a uniform course of instruction in order to train up an able and faithful ministry on whose piety, talents, and learning the temporal and eternal welfare of thousands depend. Now, this is interesting because it is very similar to what happened here at Stanford. Now, I want to read two passages. One passage was prepared before the university even began. It was kind of like a selling marketing ploy to get people to give them money in order to build it. And so they were looking for the trustees. So they were looking for people who would entrust the university with with their money and their funds. So this is what they told the trustees. What was the goal of the university? In pursuance of this object and these purposes, the trustees were directed to establish and maintain an educational system which will, if followed, fit the graduate for some useful pursuit, and while prohibiting sectarian instruction, to have taught in the university the immortality of the soul, the existence of an all-wise and benevolent Creator, and that obedience to his laws is the highest duty of man. The last thing I want to address before I close this discussion and maybe offer some questions to think about or things for us to talk about is something that one of the trustees said on this very inauguration. And again, I'm going to point the camera back to where he might have been standing so we can kind of get a pretty good picture of what he might have been doing. So there's the arch where they had the platform. And this gentleman's, his name was Judge Lorenzo Sawyer. So prior to him giving the speech at this meeting, they had everyone in the audience would sing a hymn from the Menlo Park Presbyterian Church. Then they would read together the 19th Psalm. And in the ceiling of the cornerstone, which is very near where that arch is, this is what the judge said. The ways of providence are inscrutable. Under divine guidance, his special mission on earth may have been to wake and set in motion those slumbering sentiments and moral forces which have so grandly responded to the impetus given, by devoting so large a portion of your acquisitions and the remainder of your lives to the realization of the objects thus suggested. If so, his mission has been nobly performed, and it is fit that both his name and the names of those who have executed his behests should be enrolled high upon the scroll of fame, and for the benefactors of the human race. So, the question is, what is the purpose of the university? Obviously, the purpose of the university before is, as we've seen through the examples of Archibald Alexander and Leland Stanford and Jane Stanford, the purpose of the university was to provide a training ground for people to both grow in their faith, but also grow other people into faith. How do we get back to that place? How do we get back to the point where the purpose of the university, and I don't mean just the Christian university, I mean all universities. How do we get the universities back to the place where they are focused on things like reading the Bible, things like recognizing your place in the world, things like understanding reason and how God has given us reason to understand what the world is, the natural world, the supernatural world. All of these elements need to come back to the university somehow. So how do we get to that place? How do we reconnect with our roots? I think that's kind of where I want to go with this discussion. So if you have any thoughts, questions, criticisms, sorry, this is my first video. I hope that my next video is a little better. Kind of scrounged up doing this today, and I started this morning, and it's been a very hectic day. So hopefully the next video that we do will be a little bit better organized. But anyway, thank you for listening if you stayed this far. Sorry for the length. Hopefully we'll have a good discussion. Thank you.